The call came at 2:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'd been awake anyway, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I hadn't touched, watching the rain streak down the window. My phone lit up the dark and I saw my son's name, Nathan. I almost didn't answer. We hadn't spoken in 6 weeks, not since the rehearsal dinner, not since he'd pulled me aside in that parking lot outside Carmen's and said the words I still hear sometimes when I'm trying to fall asleep. "Mom, Jade thinks it would be better if you didn't come to the wedding." I remember the sound of traffic on Route 9. I remember the smell of garlic bread from the restaurant. I remember thinking, did I hear that right? And then I remember his face, not angry, not guilty, just tired, like he'd already had this argument 100 times in his head and he was done fighting it. "She's not comfortable," he said, "with everything that happened. Between you and her mom." I stood very still. "Nathan, I've never even met her mother." "I know." He looked at the pavement. "She thinks you will be at the reception, and she wants the day to be." "I understand," I said. I didn't, but I said it anyway. Because what else do you say to your son the night before his wedding when he's standing in a parking lot telling you that his future wife has decided you don't deserve a seat at the table? I drove home. I took off my dress. I hung it back in the closet, and I did not go to my son's wedding. My name is Susan. I'm 51 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom house in Raleigh, North Carolina, that I bought myself 3 years ago after my divorce was finalized. I work as an occupational therapist at WakeMed. I have a vegetable garden in the backyard that I am mediocre at, a cat named Wallace who is extremely indifferent to me, and one son. Nathan, 28 years old, broad shoulders, dark eyes, laughs like his father used to before everything went sideways. He is the best thing I ever did with my life and also, apparently, the person most capable of breaking my heart. His wife's name is Jade. I'd met her 4 times before the wedding, twice for dinner, once at Thanksgiving, her first time at our table, or what used to be our table before it became just mine, and once at the engagement party her parents threw at their house in Cary. She was polite, reserved, laughed at the right moments. Her mother, Sandra, had hugged me at the engagement party and said, "We're so glad Nathan found someone like Jade," and I'd smiled and agreed and thought nothing of it. I had no idea, at that point, what Sandra actually was. The months between the engagement and the wedding were strange. I noticed Nathan pulling back, phone calls getting shorter, texts taking longer to return. When I asked him directly, "Is everything okay? Are you okay?" he'd say, "Yes, of course, wedding planning is just stressful." I believed him because I wanted to. I found out later that Jade had been telling Nathan things. Small things, at first. That I'd seemed dismissive at Thanksgiving, that I'd made a comment about her career. She worked in real estate, that came across as condescending. I don't remember making that comment. I've turned it over in my mind 100 times and I genuinely cannot find it. But memory is imperfect, and maybe I said something I didn't realize, and so I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Then the things got bigger. She told him I'd called her mother tacky at the engagement party. I had not. She told him I'd complained to mutual friends about the wedding venue. I had not. She told him I'd interfered with the catering choices and gone behind her back to the venue coordinator. I absolutely had not. I'd barely been consulted about anything, which I'd accepted without complaint. Nathan believed her. Or maybe he didn't fully believe her, but he loved her and chose peace. I'm still not sure which is worse. When he asked me one evening on the phone whether I'd had words with the venue coordinator, I said no, I hadn't, and I explained each thing calmly, one by one. There was a long silence. "Jade's really upset, Mom." "I know, but I didn't do those things." Another silence. "Okay," he says. "Okay." The conversation ended. 2 weeks later, the parking lot, the dress back in the closet. I won't pretend I handled it gracefully, I cried. I called my sister, Maureen, who lives in Durham, and she drove over that night and sat with me on the couch until past midnight while I went back and forth between grief and fury, and a strange numb exhaustion that settled over me like a second skin. Maureen wanted to call Nathan. I told her not to. "He made his choice," I said. "I'm not going to make him choose again." She didn't agree with me, but she respected it. The day of the wedding I cleaned my gutters. I weeded the vegetable garden. I repotted 2 tomato plants that had been struggling, and I talked to them the whole time, which I understand is slightly unhinged, but it helped. I took Wallace for something that could generously be called a walk, which mostly involved him sitting in the grass and glaring at a bird. I made pasta from scratch for dinner, which I'd never done before and which took 3 hours and turned out decent, actually. Better than decent. I did not look at my phone. I did not look at social media. I went to bed at 9:30 and I slept. The weeks after were quiet. Nathan texted me a photo from the honeymoon. Turks and Caicos, pale blue water, both of them squinting into the sun, and I responded that they looked happy and I meant it. I did not receive a response. When they came back, he called once briefly to say they were home safe. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. I threw myself into work. Spring is a busy season in outpatient rehab. People who've put off their knee replacements through winter start showing up in March, and I was grateful for the schedule, for the patience, for the particular satisfaction of watching someone walk down a hallway for the first time in 6 months and grin like they'd won something. I was fine. I was doing fine. That's not a lie and it's not bravado. I had been through my divorce. I had rebuilt my life. I knew how to do fine. And then at 2:47 in the morning, my phone lit up. Mom. His voice sounded wrong immediately. Not wrong like he was hurt, but wrong like the ground had moved under him and he hadn't found his balance yet. Nathan, what's wrong? I need to. He stopped. I heard him exhale. Are you awake? I'm awake. I need to tell you something and I don't know how to start. I got up from the table and moved to the couch, pulled my knees up, waited. Jade's mom, he said. Sandra, what about her? She's been there. Mom, the FBI called today. I didn't say anything. They came to the house, 2 agents. They asked for Jade. They said they were investigating Sandra for wire fraud, that she's been running a real estate investment scheme for at least 3 years, taking money from investors for properties that either didn't exist or that she never had rights to sell. He paused. They said it's upward of $2 million. I sat very still. The rain was still going outside. 2 million, I said. At least. They said at least. He made a sound that was almost a laugh and completely wasn't. They said Jade might be contacted further because she works in real estate too, and they wanted to know if she had any knowledge of. He stopped again. She didn't. Jade didn't know. I need you to know that. Okay, Mom, some of the investors. His voice broke slightly and he steadied it. Some of them are retirees, people who put in their savings. One couple from Charlotte put in $400,000, their retirement. Gone. I thought about that for a moment. $400,000. Someone's entire working life, handed over in trust. Sandra told them it was a guaranteed return, Nathan continued. 11% annually. She had fake prospectuses, fake property listings with professional photography. She'd hired photographers to shoot other people's properties and put Sandra's LLC name on the listings. She had testimonials from clients who don't exist. He went quiet. The agent said she's been doing this for at least a decade. Maybe longer. There are victims in 3 states. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing and I let him keep going. The property she used as our wedding venue deposit. His voice went flat. It wasn't hers to rent. She collected the deposit, held the event, and there's a lien on the property and the actual owner is now being contacted by people my mom never heard of. Another almost law. The caterer is owed $8,000. Nathan, I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry about the wedding. I'm sorry I believed her. She's falling apart right now. She loves her mom, she genuinely had no idea, but she also just found out her mom has been lying to her, to everyone, for years, and I don't know what to, Nathan. I kept my voice steady. Take a breath. He did. I heard it. You don't have to apologize right now, I said. Right now you just have to take care of your wife. Okay? That's the one thing. Everything else can wait. Here's the thing about raising a child on your own for the last 9 years of his adolescence. You learn very quickly that your job is not to be right. Your job is not to win. Your job is not to make sure everyone around you acknowledges your sacrifice or your patience or the specific grinding difficulty of putting a teenager through high school as a single parent while also working 35 hours a week and keeping the house standing and making sure there was food in the refrigerator and that he knew, always knew, that the door was open and the lights were on. Your job is to be the place he can come back to. That's it. That's the whole job. So I sat on the couch at 2:47 in the morning and I listened to my son fall apart, and I did not say, I told you something was wrong. I did not say, I knew those accusations were fabricated. I did not say, I missed your wedding, Nathan. I sat alone in my house while you stood at an altar and I missed it and I will never get that back. I said none of those things, later for those things. For now, I just stayed on the line. The story as it came out over the following days was worse than the first telling. It usually is. Sandra, full name Sandra Elaine Marsh, had been operating under multiple business names. The primary vehicle was something called Piedmont Heritage Properties LLC, registered in North Carolina. She also had entities in South Carolina and Georgia. She'd built a website that looked legitimate, with market analysis reports she'd copied from actual investment firms and rebranded. She had a LinkedIn profile with fabricated credentials. She'd claimed to be a licensed real estate investment advisor, a designation she did not hold. She'd spoken at 2 small business networking events in the Triangle area as a guest expert. The investors she'd targeted were not random. They were, in several cases, referrals from her own social circle. Friends, church members, neighbors. People who trusted her because they'd seen her at their kids' soccer games. People who trusted her because she'd brought a casserole when someone's husband had surgery. People who trusted her because she was Sandra. They'd known Sandra for years. Sandra would never. She'd also, investigators found, targeted people who were recently retired or widowed. People in transition. People who were managing new financial circumstances for the first time. People who were a little uncertain and looking for guidance from someone who seemed to know what she was doing. A woman from Apex named Louise, 63 years old, recently widowed, had given Sandra $250,000 18 months ago. She'd received 3 dividend payments in the first year, direct deposits that appeared on her bank statement. They were enough to make her trust the investment. They were, investigators determined, not returns on investment. They were portions of other investors' principal, recycled to make the scheme appear profitable. Classic Ponzi mechanics. Louise had told her daughter the investment was doing well. She was planning to leave a portion to her grandchildren. When Nathan told me about Louise, I had to put the phone down for a moment, just for a moment. Jade called me herself on a Thursday afternoon. About 10 days after that first 2:47 call, I'd been expecting it and also somehow not expecting it. Her voice was quiet and controlled in the way that voices are when someone has been crying so much that they've temporarily run out. "Susan," she said, "I don't know where to start." "You don't have to start anywhere," I said. "I do. I need to." She took a breath. "I need to tell you that the things my mother said about you, the things I repeated to Nathan, I don't know with certainty that she made them up, but knowing what I know now, I believe she did. I think she wanted. I think she was isolating herself from scrutiny. From people who might question things. And I think you would have questioned things." I sat with that for a moment. It was probably true. I'd spent 20 years as a healthcare professional learning to notice inconsistencies, to ask follow-up questions, to sit with discomfort long enough to understand what was actually underneath it. "Jade," I said, "are you sleeping?" A pause. "Not much. Are you eating?" "Nathan's been cooking. He made a turkey meatloaf last night." A tiny, fragile laugh. "It was not good. His meatloaf is never good. He refuses to follow a recipe. He really does." We talked for another 20 minutes. Not about Sandra, not about the FBI, not about the wedding I'd missed or the accusations that had kept me away. We talked about nothing in particular. Her job, the fact that she'd just discovered she genuinely loved hiking, and Nathan deeply did not, whether they should get a dog. Small things. Real things. Before she hung up, she said, "I know an apology doesn't give back what you missed. But I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, Susan." "I know," I said. "Do you think, eventually, we could try again, with you and me?" I didn't answer immediately. She waited, and I respected her for not rushing me. "I think eventually is a good word," I said. "Give it some time, let things settle. And then yes, I'd like that." Sandra Marsh was arrested on a Tuesday morning in May. Nathan told me. He'd seen it on the news. The DA's office put out a press release and a reporter from WLL picked it up. 23 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of investment advisor fraud, 2 counts of money laundering. Her bail was set at $500,000. She posted it. Of course she did. Her attorney made a statement about her intention to cooperate and her belief in her innocence, which is what attorneys are for. The investors, or some of them, were quoted anonymously in the article. One man in his early 70s described it as losing a family friend and his retirement simultaneously on the same day. He said the worst part wasn't even the money. "The worst part," he said, "was that I recommended her to my brother. My brother trusted me. I read that part twice. The restitution process, I was told, would take years. It almost always does. The money in cases like these is rarely fully recovered. It's been spent, laundered, moved. Some investors would get pennies on the dollar. Some would get nothing." Louise from Apex, the widowed woman I'd heard about through Nathan, had retained an attorney. I don't know what her case looked like. I hope she got something back. I think about her sometimes when I'm driving to work. This woman I've never met, who lost her husband and then lost her savings, and then had to explain to her daughter that the plan she'd made for her grandchildren was gone. There is something I've learned in the years since my divorce about what happens when you discover someone isn't who you thought they were. People assume the hardest part is the anger. It isn't. The anger is actually almost a relief. It's clean, it has direction, you know what to do with it. The hardest part is the rewriting. Your brain has to go back through years of memories and reclassify all of them. The time Sandra volunteered to organize the school fundraiser, was that generosity or was that building credibility? The casserole she brought when your neighbor's husband had surgery, was that kindness? The way she moved through rooms at parties, working them, making everyone feel noticed and appreciated and like they'd made a new best friend. I thought about Jade having to do that rewriting with her mother, her whole childhood. Every birthday, every holiday, every moment of what she'd understood as unconditional love, now requiring a second look. I don't know how you come back from that. But I watched Jade try, and I found, to my own surprise, that I wanted to help her. It's been 5 months now. Nathan and I talk on the phone twice a week, usually Sunday evenings and sometime midweek, whenever one of us thinks of something. Last month he drove down from their place in Morrisville and we spent a Saturday working in the backyard. He restaked my tomatoes, which had gotten out of control, and I made pulled pork in the slow cooker, and we sat on the porch afterward with sweet tea and didn't talk about anything important at all. It was the best afternoon I'd had in a long time. Jade came with him the time after that. She brought a plant, a small Meyer lemon tree in a terracotta pot. I read that they're hard to kill, she said. I thought that was appropriate. I laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed around her and meant it without effort. She's getting therapy. Individual sessions once a week with a counselor who specializes in what they call family of origin trauma, which is clinical language for your parent did something that fractured your understanding of the world and now you have to rebuild it from the ground up. She talks about it openly, which I respect. She's not pretending, she's not performing okayness. She and Nathan are also doing couples counseling, which Nathan mentioned to me once, almost sheepishly, like he thought I'd find it embarrassing. Good, I told him. Keep going. Yeah, Nathan, the fact that you're both willing to do the work when things are hard is the only thing that actually predicts whether it lasts. That's not a small thing. He was quiet for a moment. Did you and Dad ever? No, I said. We didn't, and that's part of why we're not together. He didn't have anything to say to that. I didn't need him to. I've thought about what I might have done differently. I go through it sometimes the way you go through a route you've driven 100 times, checking for turns you might have missed. Maybe I should have pushed back harder when Nathan told me about Jade's concerns. Demanded specifics. Asked him to have me and Jade in the same room, so she could say directly what she believed I'd done. Maybe that would have forced an accounting earlier. Or maybe it would have just accelerated the wedding exclusion by a month, and I'd have ended up in the same place. I don't know. I'm not sure it matters. What I know is this. I made a choice to leave the door open. I could have gotten bitter. I could have gotten petty. Lord knows there were nights when I was staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. thinking about that dress in the closet, and I had to physically talk myself down from sending a text I would have regretted. I didn't send the texts. I left the door open. And at 2:47 on a rainy March morning, my son called me because he was in crisis and I was still the person he trusted most in the world. That's not nothing, that's actually everything. A few weeks ago, Maureen came over for dinner and we sat on the porch and she asked me, finally, the question she'd been not asking for months. Are you okay? Like actually. I thought about it honestly. I do that now. I make a point of actually answering the question instead of deflecting. I missed my son's wedding, I said, and I will always feel something about that. I don't think that goes away. She nodded. But he's here now, and Jade's here now, and I think, I stopped. Looked out at the yard where the lemon tree is sitting in the corner of the porch, still small, still getting established. I think sometimes things have to break in a particular way before they can heal correctly, like a bone that didn't set right the first time. Maureen is a practical person. She made a face. That's a little grim, Susan, occupational therapist, I reminded her. Bones are basically my whole personality. She laughed. I laughed. Wallace came to the porch door and stared at us with his customary expression of tolerant contempt, and I got up to let him in, and we sat there until the fireflies came out, which they do now in June. in a way that still gets me every single year. All these tiny lights appearing in the dark like they've been there all along, just waiting for the right moment. I left the door open. He came back. That's the story. That's all of it.